I'm Ethan Wong, and today I'm here with Austin Weber.
This is where I come in?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Austin Weber, and today I'm here with Ethan Wong. Um, yeah. I'm supposed to introduce myself now?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm a singer-songwriter, a writer in general, make a whole bunch of other art stuff too, make some movies. Um, yeah, studied a whole bunch of different stuff, but I'm here in my capacity as a songwriter.
All right, we'll get straight into the questions. And so the first one I want to ask you is actually kind of based off of the way that I've come to see writing poetry myself, which is that do you think that you discover songs that are almost innately already there, or do you think you have to look for the songs in order to write them?
Um, well, when you're discovering something and when you're looking for something, it's kind of the same thing. What to use the difference between the two?
I think what I mean by saying that is sometimes it almost feels as if a poem for me kind of comes out of something that is already I'm been pondering it, or it's inside of me and it comes out in the form of a poem. Whereas other times it feels like I'm first writing a poem and then I decide I need to look for something and then I find it, if that
So
makes
it's
any
it's
sense.
about like internal generation versus like external generation
Yeah,
almost.
basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they sort of go hand in hand. I mean, the writing is a lot about, to me at least, taking stuff that's going on and putting it through yourself. Like a trying to think of a more eloquent way to say that. Uh, well, I guess I can start by saying that, the words and the music are sort of intimately connected for me. Like every phrase, um, itself has an inherent melody. Every word has a certain rhythm. Just by the function of speaking language, we're talking in rhythm right now. And if you talk outside of the normal rhythm of words, you sound weird. It sounds unnatural, which lets cues you into the fact that, culturally, and language-wise, lingually, English has its own specific rhythm. You know, uh, German has its own specific rhythm. Japanese has its own specific rhythm. Um, and the stresses and the word falls lend themselves to different um, interpretations. So, when you have an idea for a song, um, it's for me, it's intimately connected with the words, the melody, because it lends itself to words naturally lend themselves to specific melodies or specific rhythmic interpretations. I mean, there's a reason that Latin works so well in dactylic hexameter, but like you try to write in a hexameter like that, or elegiac couplets or something in English, it'd be so hard. For the same reason that if you try to write what what what's the Shakespeare meter again?
Iambic pentameter?
Yeah. If you try to write Latin and iambs, you'll also be shit out of luck. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so intimately tied with the language we speak that, you know, the internal versus external process, it's something I don't really even think about. Like you're always encountering stuff. Um, you're always encountering stuff. It's like the Kantian thing where, I forget what side of the debate he fell on this, but I remember he had some important thought that had to do with it, uh, about if you can discover everything just by thinking about it, or if you have to go out and do things to discover. And of course, you need both. Um, so I don't know if that answers your question. It's a little ramble, but I think the crux is probably that words and the song and like melody are, for me, very, very intimately connected. Um, and so the generative process can be something is, like uh, the other day, um, oh, let me just pull it up. I keep a folder of found lyrics on my phone, just things that people say. Uh, um, like I heard someone on the street say the other day, his Instagram's weird, but he's cuter in person. And I'm like, okay, that's an amazing line. Like everyone knows what that is. And it's so good. And it's doubly good because it has such a great meter. His Instagram's weird, but he's cuter in person. Like that's it's almost in I am's. Um, but yeah, I mean that's a really nice rhythmic phrase there. And you could turn that into a melody so easily. Off the top of my head, I could think of 5 or 6 or 7 different melodies, more. I mean, infinite. Uh, and so, that's like the 3-part process of the song is like the rhythmic stuff, the melodic stuff, and then of course the vibe
Yeah.
is always a big part of it. That's always a fun part of the song. But anyway, so it's a lot of external stuff, but then of course it gets derived through a internal process, the eventual thing. It's like your brain is sort of, when you're writing, at least when I'm writing, the brain is almost like a computer program where you have input and then a process and then the output, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's
I
it's a whole
definitely,
constellation of stuff.
yeah, I can tell. There's like a lot to even just talking about the creative process. It's just hard to describe. I mean, I know for me at least, it's like sometimes when people ask me to describe, or if you'd have to describe your creative process, it's near impossible because there's some points where of your own creative process, at least for me, that I couldn't even describe to myself. And so it's just all these things that come together and you kind of have to deal with it.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a little black box, and that's therein lies also the fun of it. If there wasn't a little bit of magic in there, I mean, it's fun. You don't have to understand how everything works. I think that's one of the liberating parts of doing what we do is the inherent mystery of the creative process.
Yeah. And so just branching off of that, I wanted to ask, so first of all, how far, like to what degree have you been classically trained in music?
Minimal. I mean, I've never been classically trained, as it were. Training always seems like a weird word, um, and one that I don't really like because it implies um, it implies that there are people who are trained and then people who are untrained, um, and I think that distinction is an unhelpful one. It's not like a dangerous distinction, but I'd say it's distinctly unhelpful in terms of like, what does it mean to be trained? What does training consist of with something as abstract as music? So I'd say I'm a highly trained musician, um, but my training was not like sitting down and reading Bach all day. Although to be honest, that's something I do a lot now. I found late in life joy uh, with sight reading classical music. It's awesome. But I got all my Bach books right here. Uh, um, but like basically, I think of myself really as a songwriter first. And so my training is just like listening to songs, thinking about songs, um, writing songs is how you get better at doing that. And so you know, I'm classically trained as a composer, I guess, in terms of, you know, I've studied it I in school. Same with, you know, I've studied jazz guitar for a while, but I'm, you know, it's weird that the word training in music only really applies to the classical tradition. Like you wouldn't say I've trained as a songwriter. People would be like, no, you know, and kind of the cool thing about songwriting and one of the, I don't know, it's just cool. Like so there's zero barrier to entry to songwriting. Like anyone can do it. And the thing that bugs me sometimes about saying, you know, or like talking about training is that it implies that, you know, life itself isn't training for generation. You know, I mean, everyone's got, if anyone can just go out and write a song, and that's what makes it so good, because, you know, you don't have to be trained. You know, you're training for songwriting, which is, you know, songwriting being an act of empathy in music. Um, is just, you know, living.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's never, I haven't really thought about that before. That's a great question. um but yeah, that's something.
I mean, you mentioned your like you listening to songs as part of your training for being a songwriter. So then I was curious in asking because I know influence is a big thing, or influences are a big thing. But
Yeah,
I'd like to ask, what are your non-musical influences for your music? Like
oh
whether
my
that's
God,
poetry, writing, whatever.
tons. I mean, poetry I would consider a musical influence even.
Yeah.
I've been, speaking of poetry, I've been reading a lot of W.H. Auden recently. Like his stuff. I like his more you know, he has like the rhyming poems and the unrhyming poems. I like his rhyming poems a lot. I love rhymes. Obviously, I mean, I'm a songwriter. Um, uh, so I've been, yeah, I like memorizing poems too. Um, it's a good way of thinking about stuff. It's sort of like reading music, like memorizing poems. So I've been memorizing, I just memorized the other day, you know, from the very first coming down into a new valley with a frown. That whole poem I love a lot. Um, but I'm really inspired by photography. You know, photo books. I love. I mean, I have one of my bookshelves right behind me, or right behind the camera right now. Can't really turn it around enough to see, but you know, I read a ton. That helps. Here, I love Harry Gruyaert, great photographer. I'm just looking at my books. I love Warhol's photography. Andy Goldsworthy's stuff is great. Um, yeah, man. I mean, you got to find inspiration everywhere. I mean, that's sort of the job almost. I've been reading a lot about the French and Indian, not well, the 7 Years War, aka the French and Indian War. You know, um, I've been reading a great book called Crucible of War about that. Highly recommend. Really, really interesting. Read a lot of history. Been reading a lot of Proust. Reading a lot of Churchill for some reason. Great narrative thinker there. Um, Reading a lot of just, I don't know. I read a lot. Read a lot about everything. Watch a lot of sports. It's all stories. You know, that's what makes sports great, is like the story element, the narrative. So what really makes it compelling, you know, it's because it's beautiful on a micro level and on a macro level. Um, I don't know. What was the question?
I was just asking your non like strictly musical influences for your songwriting. I think you answered it pretty well.
Yeah, I was just rattling stuff off to get there.
I mean, I think a lot of it I agree with. Like just any small thing that I pick up on, I've noticed a lot of poets do this where they like read a new article about a historical event and that spurs them to write their own poetry about it, and it'll even just maybe be tangentially related to that event, but it's just that spark is set off by these little things throughout their day or by these other stories that they are witness to, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And also I specifically connected with the part about photography because it's just weird photos or interesting or appealing photos from random places really give you the impression of some kind of story going on in the background there. And I think that's probably equally for me why those also serve as some kind of catalyst.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, photos are great. They do tell the whole story. Like especially like, there's a ton of really great, very lyrical photographers out there these days. Like my personal favorite and someone I'm proud to call a good friend is a guy named Daniel Arnold, who is just an incredible photographer. And his stuff is so like it feels so like momentary and chanced, like true frozen little moments. You know, you can really draw a whole like it, his photographs leave you going like, how is this happen? Like, what is going on here? How is this happening? Um, he himself is a great songwriter, interestingly enough. But yeah, no, photography is super important. I agree.
All right. So something else I want to ask, which is the issue of style and voice is something I hear a lot about in poetry. And in a few circles, I guess I also hear about it in regards to songwriting or music, which is leads me to the question, how did you come about to the process of feeling confident in your songwriting's uniqueness? Because receiving all these influences, at least for me, it was difficult to get to a point where I was like, oh yeah, this is my style of poetry. Many times it felt like a coagulation of other people's poetry. So how did that look like for you?
Um, it's a good question. You know, I think voice is just a confidence thing for me. Um, you know, I'm always writing like other people, and it's fun. You know, that's where the inspiration comes in. Um, like yeah, and you are what you eat in terms of songwriting, at least in my personal experience, and with a lot of my friends, we talk about this. You know, when you're listening to something, you're gonna write stuff like it. Uh, it's the input output thing is super linear almost. You know, um, you're gonna write stuff like what you're listening to. So when I wanna, you can like dictate style based on what you listen to almost. Because those are then the ideas that are ruminating, the stuff that you're thinking about, and like the things that occur to you are different. Um, so you know, I've been listening to a lot of like late '90s stuff recently, um, like a lot of karate, Weezer, um, sort of like power chord music, Duster. Uh, and because you know, both because that's just what I've been listening to, and also because you know that's I just want I want to write like this record I'm working on now. It's like I want to write a power chord record. I want to, and so I'm just super stoked on it. And you gotta, it's again, it's a research thing. Like if you're writing a book about a topic, you're gonna go out and read other books that have been written on the topic. It's fun to work in different styles. Like it frees you up a little bit. Um, and so in terms of finding your own voice, like for me, it was something where, you know, like you're never going to be unique. Like all work that happens, you know, no work happens in a vacuum. It's all, you know, it's a big web that you're joining, you know, a huge network of tangential connections and references. And it's to me, that's a much more exciting way of thinking about voice, and of thinking about style, where rather than spending all my time trying to sound like myself, you know, it's spending time trying to just do what I think is fun and interesting and worthwhile, um, and focus on, you know, what I want to do rather than trying to do something that no one's done. Because when you do something that you want to do, you're inherently gonna then do something new, do something that sounds like you. Because, you know, as someone who makes stuff, you know, sort of what we are is our taste, you know, and you can't fake taste. You can't get away from taste, you know, and because at the end of the day, if it doesn't sound authentic, if it doesn't sound like something you're actually wanting to do, you know, no one's going to listen. No one's going to pay attention, because what people want is stuff that people believe in, you know, and you can tell when someone doesn't believe in the work that they're making. It doesn't have that solid foundation. You know, it's always kind of shaky footing, and it's like such a sensorially focused thing, uh, that oh, you couldn't you. It's one of those things, you know it when you see it, but trying to describe where intentionality lies in work is just like impossible. It's just like a sense feeling that we all get as humans. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. You know, the same way you can tell when someone's lying. Uh, so
Yeah, I
that
mean,
those are my thoughts about voice, I guess.
I think those are, I definitely agree with you on the idea that it's kind of a fruitless venture, basically, to say that, oh yeah, I'm just going to be the only version of this specific kind of medium who does this thing. Because even if you scour the web or you scour whatever resources you have and you try to find, and you're like, yeah, no one has written this exact line before, even if you find that to be true in this moment, like I'm sure at some point someone has thought of something very similar, or you're always going to be disappointed by trying to seem just that much more unique. So I think there's definitely a lot of truth to be gained from you just saying that, like, try not to worry about it and just go for what you like.
Yeah,
Because yeah.
absolutely. Like I think it's way more interesting to build off the back of existing work than to try and like stake some sort of fruitless quest towards individuality.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's interesting. I was listening to an interview with Jacob Dylan the other day, and he was talking about how in the 60s, um, it was totally a different game to be like a pop songwriter in the 60s, because no one was doing it yet. Like you could actually do things that were new, you know, you could act like there was so much space um, available, so much real estate, you know, it was, you know, like the Louisiana Purchase or something. Um, but I mean, also like the Louisiana Purchase, it's not like people weren't living there before. So, I mean, like you can't get away from your references. You are what you eat. I don't think, yeah, I don't, yeah, no, it's interesting, man. I mean, it's, it's, it's so interesting to follow those lineages, those lines, and catch those references, and it's fun. Like once you accept the fact that you're not going to make stuff that's totally new, it then becomes really fun to like decide what references you want, you know, to sort of play with that. Becomes really fun, like using existing work as a material through which to work, you know, and people have been doing that for years. Like I was, you know, going through some Catullus the other day, and the dude straight up makes his own versions of Sappho poems. You know, there's no, it just like there's, it's been going on forever, man. And it's so cool when you can see how the wheel turns, and use work as a material in and of itself, you know. It's That's why, you know, you read poems if you want to write poems, you listen to songs if you want to write songs, you watch movies if you want to make movies,
Yeah.
because it's the material itself.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to kind of branch off of that. So I've noticed that a lot of the songs that you write happen to be love songs, right?
Yeah.
So, well, besides asking why you might gravitate towards those, I'd also ask, do you consider yourself in a like non-era referring, like not referring to the era, romantic? And what does that kind of mean to you?
Um, huh. I you know, yeah, a lot of my songs are love songs. That's something I'm totally aware of. I think, it's a combination of, it's easier to write a good love song than it is to write a good song of anything else, just by the way my brain works or something. Um, I don't know. I mean, I was listening to a lot of love songs. I don't think I was confident enough yet to start writing songs not about love. I couldn't tell you, a whole ecosystem of stuff. I'm trying to write less love songs these days, just because it's an interesting sort of exercise. Um, and love songs for no one, of course, a lot of love songs on there. D42 is sort of all love songs, and by love songs, I mean songs about relationships. You know, um, specifically songs about romantic relationships is sort of the crux of it. But people love songs. Everyone loves love songs. I mean, thinking about Catullus, I mean, that's what makes him so great. He's like the grandfather of romantic poetry. Um, he was not. I'm sure he wasn't the first guy, but he's definitely like the most famous first guy to be talking in big love hyperboles. 1,000 kisses, 1,000 hugs. Uh, I can't remember the rest of that poem, but there's something. He's always talking about hyperbole and big numbers, and I goes up until I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 5,000 more. And it's such a great line, that's awesome. It goes from thousands and thousands of years. People have been talking in hyperbole. That it's itself not a hyperbole, which is funny. But perhaps I should say, for millions of years, people have been talking in hyperboles. Uh, so I don't know. They're interesting. They're fun. It sort of is part of that tradition, which is also cool. But a lot of my favorite songwriters are ones who sort of free themselves of the songs about romantic relationships thing. And I was really happy with my last record, sort of having only half the songs are about romantic relationships, maybe less. Uh, you know, and it's for me, a lot of it was a confidence thing. I don't think I was a confident enough songwriter to within myself to write songs that weren't about romantic relationships or like love song, basically. Um, but a lot of my favorite songwriters, like Jonathan Richman, uh, has a great song called "City vs. Country," and it's just a song about how he wants to live in the city, but he also wants to live in the country. And you can't have both, but maybe there's a place that he can find that has kind of both. Um, uh, and it just is awesome. Like it's so. I think for a while you sort of love songs are a great entry to songwriting, and they're really wonderful in terms of everyone can relate to a good love song. But you realize as time goes on that also everyone can relate to I want to live in the city, but I also want to live in the country, and it's like it's a song that I think about all the time because you know it's such a good song. It's such a simple song. And so I've been trying to write more songs about things that just, are like that. Like I wrote a song the other month that's going to be on the new record. I've been playing it at my shows and people like it. Just about how I like my living room. Um, and it's just so much fun. I mean, it's fun to write songs like that. Little ideas. Um, the master of the Little Ideas song, sort of the two for me are Jonathan Richman and then David Byrne, who sort of exist on opposite sides of the spectrum. Um, you know, David Byrne writes just these incredible songs, with the Talking Heads, and oh, I mean, like what's that song called? I know it has a title that's not one of the lyrics. It's like "Don't Trust the Government" or something like that. Um, let me look it up real quick just to make sure I got it right. Um, but it's a song. Don't worry about the government. It's a song about like what house he wants to live in, you know, and about like modern, um, like the choices we have in modern life and the anxieties that come along with it. And that's a lot of his songwriting has to deal with that sort of stuff. But anyway, point being, a lot of my songs are love songs, um, but a lot of my songs aren't love songs, and I'm trying to write more of those because it's interesting. It's interesting. But you know, again, you write what you know, you write what you think about, you are what you eat. I'm definitely a romantic person, ergo I write love songs. You know, David Byrne definitely like an anxious a person anxious about modern life, ergo write songs about contemporary anxiety. You know, Jonathan Richman, definitely someone with like an increased part of his brain that deals with childlike wonder and naivete, and so his songs are filled with that. I mean, that's something that I love about um, songwriting, and having a lot of friends who also write songs, is that it's such a cool way to get to know someone, is to hear what they have to say in a song. It's such a, you can't fake it. Again, like you can't fake it. You can tell exactly who someone is by the songs that they're writing. Um, so yeah, that's a long-winded answer of that.
Yeah, I think there's actually interesting a lot as you were speaking. I could kind of relate to a lot of bits of that. I remember when I first started writing poetry, it was just all love poems. And then slowly I've been trying to kind of get away from that because it's easy, it's too easy, I should say, to write a love poem because you sit there and then you think about it and that's just what pops out. But I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of getting somewhere where maybe at least like a little more thought or thought from a different part of the brain gets in there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like they're all sort of like all good. There's a way of thinking wherein all good songs are love songs and all
Yeah.
good poems are love poems.
Hmm.
But by love, you know, you come to understand that love means, or at least I've come to understand that idea being like an increased, it's like a strong emotion, or
Yeah.
like a strong feeling is what makes stuff compelling. I don't know. I mean, I remember when I read. I've been thinking, of course, a lot about that Ouden poem, "Very First Coming Down." I forgot what the title is actually. But that, you know, I don't know. It's a great poem, or at least it's one that I like a lot, because it's both a love poem and it's not a love poem, and it's a love poem to a person, but you don't really know who they are or what the relationship is or what's happened. And it's about renewal, and it's just, it's about the cyclical nature of life, and you know what it means to, I don't know, I mean, it's just a great poem, you know. And so I don't know, it's like City versus Country is not a love song, you know, in the sense that you're not pining for a girl or something, but you know, it's like a love poem to these places, or a love song to these places. I don't know. It's interesting. Um, I don't know, but yeah. When did you start writing poetry?
I started writing poetry in like middle school, so like the most emotionally volatile time for me. And then it kind of just came out a lot easier then.
Like you had an easier time writing poetry in middle school?
Yeah, probably just because it was that mindset where everything seems so dramatic to you. I don't know if dramatic is the right word, but everything is so big that it necessitates writing. It requires me to write about it. But it's just as you get older, it almost feels like you kind of get numbed to things. So then maybe not everything feels like it needs to be written about as much as it used to.
That makes sense. I can relate to that. But the difference, I guess, is that I've never lost the bigness of feeling thing. Like if there's a and I guess that's important, but I think I don't know. It's definitely like part of my job to not become jaded. But also then you can write songs about being jaded and like frustrated. Like that's the cool thing. Like, you should start writing poems about like how nothing feels like a big deal anymore. Like that is such a relatable feeling. That's such an interesting thing to explore. That's awesome. Like I'm writing a song right now. Um anyway, just like yeah, that's so exciting. I think the key is that every emotion, every subject, every topic is equally important to every other one. It's all about how you convey it. And I was listening to this. I was listening to this like BBC interview with a couple Catullus scholars the other day. That's why Catullus is on my mind. And I studied Latin for a long time, so I'm a Latin nerd. And they were like poo pooing, good, no pun intended. They were poo pooing like his what they called his scatological poems, like his really dirty like poems. And they're like, well, the subject matter certainly, is not very artistic. And I'm there like, fuck you guys, like you can write good stuff about anything. What the hell? That it pissed me off so much. It pissed me off so much. Not really. I mean, I'm not a really angry guy, but I was like, come on, guys. The whole point of creating stuff is making stuff about anything. And so it was really annoying to me that uh that was really annoying to me. Um, because everything, every topic, every emotion, every possible subject has equal merit to every other one. And it's all about how we as artists interpret that emotion and convey that emotion. You can have a really, really, really incredible book about um, folding laundry. It could be the most incredible book of all time. Um, you could. I could think of a couple ways you could write a really amazing song about folding laundry. Like because it's such a, on its face, it's such a boring act. But then you think about all of like the emotional connections to laundry and to folding. Like ideas of completion and ideas of home and of family. You can write it from the perspective of a kid who's just into his own place for the first time and is folding his own laundry for the first time, and the feeling of growing older and taking on responsibility, or the feeling of folding someone else's clothes and like caring for someone and what that means. um, or you could just talk about like menial processes, folding laundry. I can't wait for this day to be over. Like I've got like 10 more shirts to fold and I don't think I'm ever going to make it through. um, every possible subject you can come up with just infinite numbers of ways in which it's important, because we all have that experience. We all have that shared experience of folding laundry and thinking like, I don't want to fucking do this now. um, and we all have the experience, or will have the experience, or can imagine the experience of, like when you're dating someone and they start like leaving clothes at your house, and you're folding their laundry to this day, and it's like that's a really huge emotional exciting moment when you have that realization where like, oh my god, like I'm folding her clothes. And like, so I mean, after this I'm gonna go write a song about laundry. I'll write a whole fucking album about laundry. You know, you can write about anything. I don't remember what the question was anymore, but point is, like, there's nothing too big and certainly nothing too small to write about. And the smaller things are the most interesting ones. That's where, at least for me, you get into like really fertile territory of associations and emotions, because it also deals with the unexpected, and it deals with stuff that, you know, we all can relate to. Like, not everyone has gone on like a big mythic quest to like you know, return the One Ring to the fires of Mordor, um but that's not what makes Lord of the Rings a great book, right? What makes Lord of the Rings a great book is how it examines ideas of like friendship, and um, obligation. You know, that's stuff we can all relate to. Because and even when it's these huge, big ideas, these fantastical ideas, what makes work great is when you can go down on that micro level, and you're not relating to Frodo because you also have a mythic quest entrusted to you by, you know, like big wizards and like big war, but it's because like you have to get a, you know, you feel obligated to your family to, you know, get a good score on the SAT, you know? Like, if you read Lord of the Rings in high school, I guarantee like you're gonna find something like that. Or, you know, you feel even an obligation to yourself to work hard, and then you feel an obligation to your friends, and you feel, I mean, and so a book about feeling obligated to do well on the SATs does not on its face seem as interesting as a book to return the One Ring to the big volcano. But it's equally important and equally interesting, and I would say maybe even more interesting, because then those associations, those risks, the way you negotiate situations and the way you draw out the drama becomes even more interesting and unexpected and worthwhile, than it might be otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you've got me thinking. Now I want to write some poems about just random stuff that I have laying around on my desk or something. Because
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, and so just one last question. I think this will be a good one to end it off on, which is, do you think have any advice you think could apply somehow to writing music, lyrics or the actual music itself, or and also writing poetry or writing fiction at the same time?
Um, well, I think the whatever the diatribe I just ran off on, those, you know, errant train tracks can provide an answer to this question as well. It's, you know, it's not about, you can do about anything, you know. Um, you think about, I studied sculpture for a long time in college, and you know, you learn a lot about uh, like, you know, ready-mades, like ready-made sculptures, that whole movement.
Yeah.
Um, on its face, again, seems a little silly, uh, like writing a book about needing to do well on the SATs seems a little frivolous, maybe. But then, you know, like, you can make anything important, and the framing is what constitutes importance for all of us, and that's something that comes to mind with ready-mades, uh, being that, you know, when you write a poem about something, when you write a song about something, what you're doing is you're taking that thing and you're putting it in a frame. You know, you're putting it on a pedestal, um, in the same way like Duchamp took a urinal and put it on a pedestal and was like, this is it. But that's that's interesting, you know, and um, it's got all kinds of stuff you can say about it. And so I think you can't be afraid to talk about what you're actually experiencing. And the trap that people get into is being like, oh, I have to write about something big, you know, I have to write about something huge. Um, but the most interesting stories, even in like the big, huge stories, are those little emotional connections, like the little associations that we have to the world around us is what makes anything compelling. Like you can think of, I'm trying to think of like a big epic movie. Um, like um, well, you know, like the classic is Proust, you know, the Madeline or whatever. Um, because that book is literally about minuscule associations being these important things in our lives. So I think the takeaway is just, you know, you can't just, you shouldn't disregard anything. I'm off the track a little bit now. Um, trying to think of a movie, but Lord of the Rings is a great example of something that on its face is just huge and inaccessible. But you know what makes it good is the same thing that makes anything else good. It's those little emotional connections, those little associations. You know, like the climax of a movie, like the climax of a war movie is like war, sort of like the biggest thing that happens. Right? That's kind of like societally, historically, wars are like the big thing that happens sometimes. And it's telling that the climax of war movies is never like the big assault, right? It's when you know, like a soldier's about to go into the big assault, and you know, remembers being a kid, right? And thinks about what it was like to, or like back to laundry, you know, right before, the night before, getting ready to like do the big war thing, um, you know, putting on his socks or something and thinking about how different it is to put on your socks now than it was, you know, like a year ago at home before all this happened, or like 10 years ago growing up, or like 20 years ago when you're a kid and your mom's putting on your socks. And those associations you can have with, you know, like sitting down to eat a meal, um, you know, and the contrasts and the similarities, and it's all shit we can relate to. You know, everyone's been far away from home and felt lonely and felt scared. Um, and sometimes you have to, I don't know, I think, you know, people have a tendency to think that in order to draw someone in, you need these huge, huge ideas like war, or like, you know, I don't know, I can't top war. War is a big idea. Or like outer space, you know, but it can be just like, it can be anything. And so I think the important thing to remember is that anything, any uh, emotion is not only, you know, to use like the catchphrasey word of the day, like not only are they valid, uh, but they're also important and worthwhile. And so, you know, like what you were talking about, you know, feeling less inspired perhaps, or like feel like things are less important or less emotional, like that's a huge thing that everyone and how old are you?
17 now.
Yeah, like I remember when I was 17, like you have that like sense of ennui almost, where like, you know, you're feeling jaded and like, ah, shit. And I remember that. And I think everyone remembers that. Everyone's felt that way. And that's so interesting. Like you should be writing poems about that. I'd read the hell out of those. Um, I'd love to, by the way, I'd love to read some of your poetry if you could send it over. I've been trying to find it. Um,
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, there's a collection I have up on Amazon right now, but
whoa,
I
okay.
can send you a link to that.
I would love that. I'll get it from Amazon. Um, but I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think, yeah, I think a big thing for me has been like thinking about, wow, said use the word same word twice. Uh, just considering all the little things that go into a poem. I mean, some of the most interesting poems for me have been poems that come out of very little ideas, or sometimes you just really want to read a poem about someone's day out to the park. And I remember someone shared a poem with me, which was, there was no point in the poem that I feel like the author was trying to give you a big idea, trying to instill some kind of deeper societal message in me. It was just literally the author went out, had a nice day at the park with their family, and then they wrote about it. And I thought that's always stuck with me because I've read all these poems about deep ideas, but I still remember this one poem this poet wrote about just having a nice day. So I think it really is just about that.
Yeah, it's such a simple magic, but one that's so hard to capture. That's why it's fun, you know. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, that's it.
Yeah. All right. So that's about all the time we have for today. So thank you for
Thank
coming.
you. Thanks
And don't
for
forget to,
talking to me.
yeah, and don't forget to check out Austin Weber. You can search him up online. You can find all his stuff. He has Instagram and Spotify. So don't forget to check him out on all those platforms.